everybody. Welcome back to Founder Sessions with Nomad Financial. Today, we've got Taki Kafedjian, who is director of our tax group. We'll be talking about the essentials for filing your tax return and what can ensure that you'll be successful and save, well, as much as possible. So first, we'll start with Taki giving some of her background, where you've been, where you're going, what brought you to Nomad, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I started my career 10 years ago at a traditional tax firm and made my switch to Nomad about 2 years ago, looking for a more dynamic role by building up a tax team. I have a BA in accounting from Queens College, MS in tax law from Peace University, CPA license to practice in New York State. And my role here at Nomad is to make the worst time of the year a seamless process for companies and individuals.
Nice, awesome. So, in that on that note about the worst time of year for people, what can founders do to really set themselves up for success for their tax returns? I mean, in many cases, you start a business. I know some of our clients hadn't even filed tax returns for multiple years. What do you think are the best practices for people to set themselves up so that their returns are smooth, easy, they can get the most out of it?
Right. I would start with collecting W-9s from domestic contractors, W-8 bends from foreign contractors, making sure that your cap table is up to date at year end. Amendments to any formation documents are key. Revenue by state is really important. Making sure that your estimates are paid up during the year, and also making sure that your financial statements are ready for tax prep in January.
Awesome. So you mentioned knowing your revenue by state.
Right.
And we've seen that that's a really big challenge for many startups because it can be a bit of a hardship for them to do that unless they are thinking about it and they start from the beginning. So, and I believe it's called State Nexus, is that right? So why is it important to track revenue by state?
Yeah, a lot of companies don't usually do that because until year end when your tax preparer asks for it and they're like, oh my God, where is it? What am I supposed to do? And it's a very tedious job, but it's really important to track it. You might have filing requirements within the state, so if you meet certain thresholds. So you might have to make sure that you're tracking it each state and relaying that to your tax advisor.
So what would that look like for me if I was doing business in multiple states? So let's say that I had clients who were in Massachusetts and in California, but I'm actually a New York-based company. So should I be tracking revenue specifically by those states based on those clients?
You have to track your clients wherever they're living. You have to track their address. So making sure, let's say you get $10,000 from a client, you would have to track it for, let's say, Massachusetts or Delaware or New York.
So do you have any examples of some funny things that certain states have that are just a bit unusual when you're looking at those kind of state filings?
I don't know about unusual. Every state is very different.
Or some examples of a couple states.
I don't know.
Okay. We can come back to that. So, but speaking of states in particular, I understand that in Delaware, when you've actually incorporated, which we know many startups tend to do because there is so much breadth and depth of legal, are prior examples of legalities that they choose to work in Delaware, or rather to incorporate in Delaware. So there's something called Delaware franchise tax estimates, and that seems to be a big pain point for people that they're not really aware of when they incorporate in that state. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
So I've had a couple of clients receiving tax franchise estimated vouchers from Delaware that have these ridiculously large amounts of money on them, and they start freaking out and they're like, oh my God, what is this? So Delaware calculates the tax two different ways. One is the assumed par value method, which is a complex way of calculating the tax, and that's how these vouchers are calculated. The default method is the authorized shares method, and that's the one that we use annually. So when I'm filing the franchise tax report March 1st, I'm going to use the default method. So they shouldn't freak out about this. It's just, it's an estimate. It's not a notice to pay. So, yeah.
Okay, so I guess when people receive these notices, they look very official, they look really
Right,
scary.
Very scary.
And it seems like the method that they typically use to calculate
Is the more complex, but D will use the lower of the two. So usually the lower of the two is the default method, which is the authorized.
Got it. So
that's what we use.
So you see what they've sent, and then you use the default method, and whichever one is lower is the recommendation you make to the client of what they need to actually pay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
What if you're not actually profitable? Are you still paying those taxes?
Yes, you're paying it because you're incorporated. It's not really a tax. It's more of a fee to the state for being incorporated within the state.
So that's the distinction.
Yes.
It looks like a tax estimate, but it's really more like a fee.
Yes, and you definitely can't opt out of receiving these estimated tax vouchers. Yeah.
So do they grow exponentially as your revenue increases?
Probably.
Yeah. So, and it's not based on profit, it's just straight revenue.
It's based on gross assets and also your common shares issued.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So in other words, we need plenty of folks looking into those things before they decide to actually incorporate in Delaware.
Right, absolutely. And also don't freak out.
Yeah. So if I'm incorporated in New York, I'm not going to have to pay these strange franchise estimate taxes /
you don't
fees,
have to pay
if you will.
No.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Especially the smaller companies that are at a loss. Yeah.
In that regard, is it better, in your opinion, for clients to strongly consider filing or registering in the state that they're physically located in as opposed to Delaware?
It really depends.
Yeah.
It really depends.
I guess it depends on their assets and their outstanding shares.
Depends on where they are. It depends on what their long-term goals are. Yeah.
Okay, great. So now that people have, they've got some best practices on what to do. They know that they need to think about what states they're doing revenue in. Now we've given them some food for thought on incorporating in Delaware. But what about the end of the year? So what are the considerations from a tax perspective that founder management teams should really consider at the end of the year?
I would consider any expenses that were planned to be paid in 2018 to be paid in 2017 if they're on cash basis, and also if they're profitable for the year, to lower their profit. Not so much for the loss companies. They can wait to pay expenses later on, but that's one aspect. If you have any accruals for compensation, you can pay them 2.5 months after the close of the year and still apply the expense and the benefit of the expense in 2017.
That's a good one to know.
Yeah. What else? There are a lot more, but those are the main ones.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then for our final topic, this seems to be a hot topic for everybody.
Huge topic.
Yeah, is these R&D credits.
Yeah.
So what's the background on that? Why has that become such a hot topic in the last year?
So if you're a loss company, you wouldn't be able to take the benefit of the credit, and you would have to keep on carrying it forward. Now you can apply the credit to your payroll taxes. And a lot of these companies have been popping up saying, oh my God, we have R&D, like what's going on? So the first step I would say is talk to your tax advisor. A lot of people are not specialized in this field, so they would probably link you up with someone that is specialized to do the testing for you, to see if you even qualify for the credit. If you filed on the original due date, which was April 15th of 2017, you made the assessment after the fact, you can always go back and amend the return and take the credit and apply it to the following payroll period.
So anyone who's already filed for 2016 taxes,
they can go back and
still
amend
go
it.
back.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So get on that, folks. If you have some R&D, you have the option now to take that.
And yeah, it's definitely a huge benefit. If the cost of hiring someone is not beneficial, then I would talk to your tax advisor and see if you can come to a certain agreement on how much to take, and apply it for the payroll.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. So we're just going to take a look and see if we have any questions that have come up. Let's see. So far we don't have any questions, so we'll just wrap up before we finish. If you have any recommendations or advice for folks as they're starting their own businesses and they're thinking about what their tax liabilities will be, how do they make sure that it's robust and they do the right thing, set themselves up for success?
I would definitely have a tax advisor in the room when you're setting up your company, just to make sure that you're setting it up correctly in the structure that either a C corp or an LLC. Yeah, definitely helpful.
What are the pros and cons to the two? Would you say, like, certain aspects of whether you want to be incorporated as a C corp or an LLC?
Depends.
Why would founders want to go one way or the other?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to do long term, right? So if you want to pass losses to yourself every single year, then or you only have 2 partners, I would become an LLC. If you want to raise capital in the future, I would say C corp.
Right. From my understanding, institutional investors are unable to then opt into buying an LLC or buying shares in an LLC.
Yeah.
It's a much more difficult process.
I've seen a lot of conversions from LLCs to C corps.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Because of fundraising.
Yeah.
And what does that process look like for conversions?
It's a long one.
Yeah, I've heard it's expensive as well.
It's very expensive. It's not done from the beginning.
So you want to be thoughtful.
It's very important.
Yeah, about whether you're going to choose the LLC because you plan on being, self-funded, bootstrapped, et cetera, or if you want to be a C corp because you have plans to raise institutional funds or rather funds from institutional investors.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Just checking if we have any other questions yet. We don't at the moment. If you have any questions, any additional questions you want to throw in there, audience in the room?
Yeah, I would say another one is it seems like they're getting more flexible. Just the business environment being with the tax credit, and with regulatory.
Flexible is one thing. You might still get audited.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be very careful. You have to, in regards to the payroll, the R&D credit, you have to make sure that you have supporting documentation for everything. Because they might come back and say, no, this is, you can't take this. You don't qualify.
Yeah, that seems to be the common thread with anything finance related. With accounting, with taxes, with any of your finances, having an audit trail, having documentation to back things up seems to be the common thread, at least in my conversations in these founder sessions, that's what sets you up for success. That if you're audited, if the IRS comes after you, so long as you have the documentation showing that you've been compliant.
Documentation and the right team behind you to support you.
Yeah, that's also another common thread, is the team. You've got to have a solid team and a person who can quarterback what they call the data center, from what I've heard people use before, the term, which is really all of your documentation. What your, all of your audit trails, all of your financials, each of them pinpointed it monthly, this kind of documentation to support the kind of tax opportunities that you have. It seems to make sense that you want to make sure you have those things filed away, easily accessible, done in the right way. So it sounds like it makes sense to have a strong financial and tax advisor available to you when you're setting these things up. What do you look for in a strong tax advisor?
Couple code sections thrown in there.
Okay, what does that mean?
I don't know. A lot of tax advisors reference code sections, and it shows that you know something, right? But for the layman's, I guess it's not really helpful.
Yeah.
Someone that's there for me all the time, just for random questions.
So
kinda
easily
like
accessible.
guiding me.
Provides the guidance.
Yeah.
What are the kind of questions you might ask a tax advisor to test their knowledge?
Oh man.
If you were thinking of starting your own company,
Right.
what would you think to ask this person to ensure they know what they're doing?
Right. I would say just background and experience. I know a lot of tax accountants, they specialize in certain fields. It's kind of nice to find someone that's a generalist that kind of knows a little bit about everything. But yeah, someone that's super like eager to learn and all the regulations and up to date with, you know, what's going on with politics and things like that.
So someone who's going to tell you about the R&D tax credit
Right.
as those kind of things happen and change,
Right.
and keep you informed as much as they're available to you for one-off questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes
And
sense.
sometimes text messages.
Yeah, I mean, the informal, you know, interaction is pretty important for
Right.
developing the relationship.
Right.
Awesome.
Taki, I have another question. So I know you've dealt with, you know, Nomad has a lot of clients, you know, both internationally and here in the United States.
Ooh, international questions.
It will be. Can you just tell us about one or two of the tax engagements you've had? You know, either your favorite or like a nightmare. You're gonna talk a little bit about that. Like, you don't have to name any names, but you know.
Putting me on the spot. A nightmare. I have one client, I won't name them. They're in multiple countries. They have subsidiaries in multiple countries. Their parent is in the UK. Usual parents are there. And just understanding the business and how everything flows was the hardest part, which took hours. And researching the regulations that and the code that backs it up and the compliance, and just making sure everything is squared away was the hardest part of this client.
Did the client provide the documentation in a clean format, or you still you do a lot of digging?
The documentation was more the financial statements for each entity, for each subsidiary, and I just had to piece everything together and see how it flowed. Yeah.
And then confirm
Confirm
that it was
and confirm.
put together in a compliant manner, if you
It was
will.
definitely one of the scarier tax returns.
How long does a tax return like that take?
To do all the research and the compliance, the prep work, the review, I would say around 40 hours.
Wow.
At least.
Wow. So a full week's
And
work.
it's federal. It's not even states.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. All right. Well, still no questions from those watching live. So anyone else in the room have a couple questions they want to ask or share?
I have plenty of questions. I love tax, so
Hold on, I have a question.
Yeah.
How is it on the operation side for the tax group? Like, what is your experience like?
Yeah, so essentially managing a tax group and the inflow of it. Well, it's about being thoughtful about how to work with your clients. So most people, tax in general is just this very big black box for them, and they don't quite understand it. And you know, you and I have talked many times where you've discussed certain regulations, and I've said translate that into English, because I don't know what all of these things are. Now, of course, I'm learning. And that seems to be the most important thing that we want to elicit to all of our clients, is we want them to walk away feeling like they learned something and that they feel like they have more control over their tax liabilities or their tax opportunities and what they need to be successful. And that can be challenging because then you're managing those one-on-one relationships with people. So a big part of it is trying to be thoughtful about the systems that you're setting up to support, folks like you to be able to do the execution work and to still have the time to be consultative and respond to your clients, and trying to think of all the hacks of how we automate things, how we problem solve, the tools we give you to support you in doing that. Not always easy, not to mention the time of year, it's a beast. They all hit at the same time. And one of the areas you and I have talked about is how do we determine which clients should go on extension? And then because we know that they might take those deductions you mentioned 2.5 months later to still be able to apply the previous year. If they plan on doing things like that, then we know automatically to put them on extension. So it's really about understanding how you can be most productive to support the team so that they can be very efficient. It's about recognizing these situations where clients are going to do best by going on extension in advance and trying to spread the work out along the way so that you can give that individualized attention to folks.
Right.
And then following up at the end with clients, making sure that they're comfortable with it, they understand, they've learned something and taken something valuable away from it. that seems to be the most important feeling for people, which you yourself said, you want somebody who's readily available to you.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're trying to do. Yeah.
You mentioned the extensions. That's one of the reasons why end of the year planning is really important, to kind of gauge whether you're going to be filing on time, which is either 3/15 or 4/15, or if you need that extra time. It's okay to go on extension. I feel like a lot of people
that scares them.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely scared of that, but there's no, they shouldn't be afraid of it. It just gives them more time to be more thoughtful about what they want to do.
Now, is now too soon to start thinking about 2018?
No,
Wow.
it's never too soon.
It's never too soon?
Well, no, 2017 is closing, in 2018. We're ready.
Yeah, so what are the kind of conversations you'd be having with folks if they were starting to think about their 2017 return already?
Like I mentioned, financial statements, are they going to be ready? If you're not going to be ready, how much time do you need? And why do you need it? If you know the answers to that, then I would just go on extension right away in January. Don't even think about it. If you can answer those questions, then you're good to go. You don't have to worry yourself.
What are the deadlines for folks who file on time or versus go on extension?
Filing on time for partnerships is now March 15, and individuals and C Corps are in April 15. And if you do go on extension, your deadline after that is extended by 6 months. So it'll be September 15th and October 15th, and they're coming up for my extended folk.
Yeah, so you're working on finishing up all those returns now. Yeah, and in those cases, was that a decision by the client to go on extension, or was that something that you decided that they should do?
It was both. It was a decision between the accounting team and also the client, and then I piggyback off of that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Just one more quick check, see if we have any questions from those watching at the moment. We still don't, but we probably have time for one more question from the room before we wrap things up for the day. So Taki, Nam, anyone else want to provide some more insights for those who are watching?
Okay, I have a question for you. How can you market tax, the tax services better than we have in the past?
I think it's just about education. I guess we'll go around the room. I think it's about education. I think being informed and understanding there are opportunities that some people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so the more we educate people, our clients, the more they know that there are opportunities for them to save money, because it's important for startups when they're resources restricted. And so I think that's one of the biggest things. So opportunities like this where we're sharing your insight and Stephen's insight onto how clients can better prepare and better manage their tax. I think it's a no-brainer at the end of the day. So there's no marketing necessary. It's more they already know that it's helpful for them and it's beneficial. You have to pay for the taxes, but you save in the long run. So I think there's no marketing about it. It's just more us educating clients.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's about the experience for people where if they know that, again, they walk away having learned something from their interactions and they feel like they very much benefited from the person that they're working with, then it gives them confidence that they're working with very competent people, and they'll make referrals. They absolutely will. Not to mention that as a generalist, you may then need to develop a larger network with people who are specialists. Those people can then refer business to you as well. And further, you have the opportunity to then go in and do consulting work, because it's not just all about the return itself, but there are various things that come up throughout the year where you can add a lot of value.
Okay.
So it's really doubling down on the folks that we already have, demonstrating our expertise, and developing that network of other people to do referrals in for us, and continue to build the business that way.
Definitely word of mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, awesome. So we're signing off for today. This was more on how to set up your tax function with Taki Kafedjian. We'll see you again next week at 5:30 for more founder sessions.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.